This one was about a 13-year-old boy named Ji Song-ho. The year was 1996, and he was living in North Korea. He was living, I didn't even say living, he was trying to survive the famine in North Korea. The famine, he lived with his parents, his younger brother, his sister, his grandmother had already died from starvation. We found out later that Kim Jong-il actually starved this whole region of his country, kind of like the Russians did. Communists like to do this. They just starve people to death. They cut off all of the food, and death was closing in on this kid's family. They were living off of corn stalks, not corn stalks and roots. His family spent most of the day just lying on the floor. They were too weak to stand. But he was in charge of going out and finding food or finding something that they could possibly trade for food. And he would wait in the middle of the night in freezing weather, and he would wait for the right time to raid the coal train. The only time the trains weren't guarded by armed police was the pre-dawn hours. And so when the train would move out of the station at night, all of these starving people would run out of the shadows, and they would crawl up on top of the coal car, and they would bring these little bags or whatever they had, and they would put a couple of handfuls of coal in, and they would throw it down off the track to somebody who was part of their family, and they would take that coal and they would exchange it for food. That's the only thing that kept them alive. Well, he got up and he grabbed his sack, he tossed it down, and then he fell. He didn't just fall, he fainted from hunger. And he fell down in between the cars and onto the tracks, and the train was moving. He said he woke up to the sound of his sister screaming in horror for help. All of these starving people that were on the train just to get food, they all came to his aid. He said he felt the warmth of his blood spilling out. The train had taken an arm and a leg as it ran over him on the tracks, but it wasn't clean at all. These starving people picked him up. They could all barely walk, they were so weak. And they brought him to a doctor in the town. It's not a hospital, it's just a guy. He had no medication at all. He couldn't dull the pain, and he said, "I've got to saw your arm and your leg off cleanly." He said he could feel his spine rattling with the teeth coming across. He somehow or another survived, and his weak father fashioned 2 wooden crutches, and he depended on those crutches just to beg in the streets. He couldn't do anything. When he was 17, he managed to illegally cross into the border in China. He found an underground church there where Christians gave him food. He said the animals are fed better in China than North Koreans are. You'd think he has a chance to escape. He's with people who will feed him and care for him. He's missing an arm and a leg. He took that food back over across the border so he could feed his family. That's when they caught him. They took him into prison for 20 days and they tortured him. That's when he realized there is no life, there is no future for North Korea. He waited 6 years, and Ji and his younger brother escaped again, and they made it into China. They planned to travel to South Korea, but he said, "I'm going to slow you down and we're going to get caught. Please go in front. Just go." He went by himself. He wound his way through China. He found Christians there that would help him. He had to go through the jungles of Laos on crutches. He finally goes into Thailand. He makes it. He finds his way to the South Korean embassy in Bangkok, where the officials say this ghost-like appearance of a man just showed up. They transferred him to Seoul, where he spent time in the hospital, and then they fitted him with an artificial arm and leg. He was reunited in Seoul with his brother. A few years later, they managed to smuggle out their mother and their sister, but Ji's father was caught escaping, and they tortured him to death in prison. He's an illegal alien. He crossed the border in China. He crossed the border of Laos. He crossed the border of South Korea. He was there illegally. Do you think the South Koreans were talking about him as an illegal alien? Do you think if he would have made it on a boat to our shore, Do you think we would have said to him, "Get out of here. There's nothing here for you. You got to come through the front door"? We would have embraced that man because that man was escaping a horror. There are people that are trying to get to America from South America, from Mexico, that are trying to escape the horror of whatever is happening in their town because it's absolute lawlessness. Do you really think Americans want to shut the door on those people? We don't. Do you see there's a difference between a guy like G and the two guys that were gang members from MS-13? Don't you think? Can't you see a difference between those two? Can't you see a difference between somebody even coming here illegally who were just trying to escape poverty because they had no opportunity for their kids back where they lived? And so with an open border and with administrations time and time again basically encouraging people, we're not going to do anything. You don't think you would cross that border if your kids had a chance to better themselves and actually live like Americans do? Conservatives and liberals, we're not heartless. Americans have a bigger heart than just about anybody else. We just want to know who's here. That's it. And if you are if you are one of the poor, huddled masses yearning to breathe free, we will give you a chance. That's the only promise America gives. A chance to prove to yourself and to others, I am not what the last place said I was. There is something in me that is special. That's who we want here. And I think America is tired of the games. And I do not think that the average Democrat in the middle of the country is looking at these two guys, these three people, these two stories. I don't believe that they just think, oh, look at that. He's calling all immigrants gang members. No, he's trying to show compassion for both the people that live here in America that are killed, slaughtered in our streets by people who should not be here, and showing you an immigrant with great progress that is being slaughtered in his